afternoon, and welcome to this joint work session of the Eugene City Council and the Lane Transit District Board of Directors. And I now call this February 28th, 2022 City Council work session to order.
I'm going to challenge you and say good evening, because it seems it's been a long Monday already, but good evening, everyone. I'm actually going to now call the February 28th, 2022 LTD Board of Directors meeting to order. And per usual, we will do a roll call. Pete Knox.
Here.
Thanks, Pete. Emily Secord.
Here.
Thank you so much, Emily. And Gino Grimaldi.
Here.
Thanks, Gino. Michelle Weber.
Here.
Thanks, Michelle. Don Norden.
Here.
Thanks so much. And Susan Cox.
Here. Here.
Thanks so much, Susan. All right, back to you, Mayor Venus.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us in this remote meeting format. We're getting close to the end of this, but we're still on Zoom. But we're continuing to use this as our state and community continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. This format enables us to meet and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on the city's website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And as always, other avenues of communication with me, the city councilors, and board members are available, including email and voicemail. And thank you again for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it to the city manager to introduce the topic.
Thank you, Mayor and Chair Vargas. I join in. It's great to see some familiar faces here. So fun conversation tonight. I know we have a great team that is going to kind of lead us through this conversation together. And I'm going to just ask Rob Interfeld to jump in and kick it off, and we'll just get started.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Rob Interfeld, Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Eugene, and I'm here with Andrew Martin, who is my co-project manager for Moving Ahead, along with Terry Harding in the Planning Division of the City of Eugene, and Terry will be available to answer questions. So Andrew, do you want to go ahead and share the presentation? Great, and if you want to go ahead to the next slide, please. So Moving Ahead is a partnership between the City of Eugene and LTD that's been studying what kind of investments we want to make on 5 of our most important streets and corridors over the next 10 years. These corridors are Highway 99, River Road, downtown to LCC via 30th Avenue, Coburg Road, and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Using community input, we developed high-level street design concepts that would provide increased safety and accessibility for people walking, biking, rolling, and riding the bus. Next slide, please. Moving Ahead is about implementing many of the city's and LTD's plans and policies around growing our community, building a safe transportation network, getting people where they need to go, and making transit an efficient and convenient option. And Moving Ahead does this by taking a look at some of our most important streets and asking what kinds of investments we need to make them work better. And now Andrew's gonna take it from here for a bit.
Sure. So the concepts we studied included high-level street design concepts with 3 transit options on most corridors, with safety and access improvements that were designed to be implemented in distinct ways on each of the corridors. No build alternative means no investment as part of Moving Ahead, or not now. The enhanced corridor alternative was designed as a moderate level of investment, and MX was designed as the highest level of investment. These concepts for each corridor were designed from the beginning with input from the community and with the goal of minimizing any of the potentially negative consequences that come from changes to the existing roadway. We began this process in 2015 by working with community members to come up with the conceptual designs. The photo on the screen is an example of one of those 5 workshops we did. And we asked what it would feel like to use the corridor if we were successful. Using their designs, we've been doing analysis and gathering feedback. Our analysis has been focused on taking a high-level look at what kinds of impact we would expect to things like trees, property, safety in the corridors, travel times for people driving and people taking the bus. That high-level analysis, combined with feedback from the public, informed a staff recommendation, which we believe can best meet the goals that were set out by the board and the council when we started this project. In December, we presented that staff recommendation to the Moving Ahead Oversight Committee and LTD Strategic Planning Committee, and both made the same recommendation. We will outline that recommendation for you and the reasoning behind it, but first, I wanted to highlight what the decision that we will ask City Council and LTD's board to make in March actually is. So we're going to ask you all to select a locally preferred alternative on each of these corridors. And a locally preferred alternative is a key part of the federal environmental review and permitting process. The simplest explanation is that we're narrowing our options for what to continue studying on these corridors. An LPA sets the high-level vision for the corridor, but is not the final design. If we select MX on a corridor, it does not lock us into a specific MX design, but it does mean that we'll be working on figuring out what that MX corridor looks like. The next step of the process is to take that conceptual design and make it detailed, where hopefully we can minimize or eliminate any negative impacts and increase the benefits to people who want to use these streets. We'll do that with public involvement and with direction from both the board and the council. Rob, do you want to take us through the staff recommendation?
Sure. So this is more than just the staff recommendation. We made this recommendation to two committees that advise both of these bodies that are meeting tonight. One of them is called the Oversight Committee, and that's made up of LTD board members, city councilors. I think there's a Lane County commissioner on it, and also staff from ODOT and the city and the Central Lane MPO. And then there's also an LTD Strategic Planning Committee, and both that committee and the Oversight Committee unanimously supported this recommendation, which is the following: to have enhanced corridor on Highway 99, MX on River Road, no build on 30th, but to reconsider what options make sense in that corridor in the future. Enhanced corridor on Coburg Road, but with additional design refinement and study and community engagement, and enhanced corridor on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. So now I'm going to go into more detail on the recommendations. So enhanced corridor on Highway 99, and some folks might ask, well, why not MX on Highway 99? And our studies found that the enhanced corridor had nearly all of the transit and safety benefits of the MX alternative, but at a much lower cost. And for transit to work well on Highway 99, it needs only a few key investments, and we would be making those investments with either the enhanced corridor or the MX. But the greater additional cost for the MX is because of the station infrastructure and the more expensive buses. And the MX kind of infrastructure can make a big difference in if the land use planning has been done, like I'll talk about in a minute, that's been done on River Road. And that kind of land use planning effort hasn't happened on Highway 99 yet, to look at how can we have supported land uses around the MX stations. Some other relevant information about the enhanced corridor recommendation for Highway 99 is that it provides a 34% transit travel time increase compared to the no build, improvement compared to the no build. Like I said, the safety benefits are comparable to the MX, and it will actually increase transit frequency without raising LTD's overall cost for the overall LTD system. And like I said, the capital costs are much lower than the MX. Next slide, please. It's also it's less impactful to neighboring businesses and property owners. The feedback from the public was supportive of investments along the Highway 99 corridor, especially in terms of the safety benefit. And then there's also the opportunity or possibility that if enhanced corridor were built on Highway 99, it could be expanded and improved to MX in the future. So now we'll talk about River Road. We're recommending MX on River Road, and it will provide the greatest travel time savings significantly compared to the other options. One of the reasons for this is that on sort of lower River Road south of Maxwell, there'll be one outer lane dedicated to buses and treating vehicles, what we call a BAT lane. And not only will that help improve the bus travel times, it'll help lower speeds for traffic overall on River Road. And we've heard a lot of complaints over the years from the River Road community about speeding traffic and the safety hazards related to that. Our traffic modeling has shown that it will not increase congestion or delay for people driving to have the one general purpose travel lane in each direction. At Beltline, transit, pedestrian, and bicycle safety is addressed with dedicated transit lanes, including transit-only signals. And the conceptual designs that we're going to be refining show a shared use path or just really wide sidewalks on both the east and west sides of the road. The MX alternative has much greater ridership compared to the enhanced corridor, and it contains much greater safety investments for people walking and biking. Next slide, please. The MX alternative also has the potential to support much more redevelopment along the corridor that's supports the city's goals around land use. The River Road Santa Clara neighborhood plan calls for these kinds of transit investments in the neighborhood. And in fact, Lane Transit District and the city worked with the neighborhoods on a transit-oriented development study. And there was neighborhood support for really looking at having more compact development around the potential MX stations. And during the public process, the MX alternative had the highest amount of public support and the no build had the lowest. Next slide, please. So for 30th Avenue out to LCC, so this will go on like Oak and Pearl and then Amazon Parkway and then 30th out to LCC. And as a lot of you know, there's already pretty frequent bus service on that corridor to serve LCC. The studies showed that the enhanced corridor NMX alternatives provided minimal travel times savings, and the enhanced corridor wouldn't even increase ridership. And it's just challenging too to match up a regular service like an enhanced corridor or MX with the kind of the needs of LCC in terms of like time of year, things going on throughout the day when classes start, that sort of thing. More recent studies have shown that transit may be more appropriate or higher frequency transit on some other streets parallel to Amazon Parkway like Hilliard and Patterson, which we did not study as part of moving ahead. So we think it really makes sense for any investment in this corridor to happen after some other studies happen looking at Hilliard and Patterson. The city also has an interest in looking more closely at the part of 30th within the city of Eugene. And also just more recently, Lane County is wrapping up their own study of their section of 30th. Next slide, please. For Coburg Road, we're recommending enhanced corridor. Both the enhanced corridor and MX resulted in identical travel time savings. And the enhanced corridor provided many of the same safety benefits as the MX alternative, but with much lower impacts to adjacent properties and residences and businesses. Next slide, please. In terms of public engagement, the enhanced corridor had the highest overall average rating of the alternative. So there was a lot of support for MX, but there was also a lot of negative support, people that had concerns about MX. And overall, there was, if you just average it all out, the enhanced corridor had the most support, and the no build actually had the lowest amount of support. The other thing is that over time at the city, we've observed that there's more and more traffic delay on the lower part of Coburg Road from the Ferry Street Bridge to Oakway. And we really like to kind of take a step back and study that section again before kind of locking down into any design concept for that part of Coburg Road. So what we're recommending is that we do some more study and design refinement on that lower end, and then overall some more community engagement for the entire corridor before moving forward with the design concept for Coburg Road. But the idea would be that as we study it more, we'll be looking at it from the perspective of the enhanced corridor. And then the last corridor we looked at is Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And here we only looked at enhanced. That was the decision made earlier in the process to not look at MX. And the enhanced provides a 15% travel time increase compared to the no build for buses. The city, it's also one of our Vision Zero high crash corridors, and there's a lot of just dangerous driving behaviors on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, partially because of the curves, a lot of weaving traffic. And so the city applied for a grant a few years ago through a state grant program focused on safety called All Roads Transportation Safety. And we were successful, and the grant will enable us to convert the outer lanes on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to the bus and turn lanes, the BAT lanes, and also to add some enhanced pedestrian crossings. So to really make that corridor safer, to eliminate the unsafe driving conditions that we see today, and start to implement some elements of the moving ahead enhanced corridor. Probably the most important area from a travel time savings is the intersection at Coburg Road. We would look at that as part of that design refinement that I was talking about earlier for Coburg Road. And that's the end of the recommendation. Andrew, do you want to talk about next steps?
Sure. I'll give you a break. In March, we're going to come before both of your bodies. We're scheduled to come to you March 14th and March 16th at your meetings respectively and ask you to select a locally preferred alternative on each of these corridors. As I mentioned earlier, that is kind of a key project milestone, but there is a lot more process left to do before we're ready to actually implement any of these things. So to give you an idea, kind of the much longer time span on this is we'll come to you in March and we'll ask you for a locally preferred alternative. And that really is kind of, we need a locally preferred alternative before we can really take the next steps to work on more detailed designs for an alternative on each corridor. We will, as the slide says, we need to refine those designs, and that includes a lot of stakeholder engagement, particularly with people who may be impacted directly, their property or access to their property. We need to, while we're doing that, start to think about seeking funding and the best way to pay for these things, whether that's certain types of federal funding or whether we want to approach them incrementally. We'll have to be really strategic about how we want to implement such a transformative package of investments. We have to complete the environmental review and go through permitting and construction. And only then would we be able to actually enjoy these corridors in kind of their transformed way. So that we expect that it will take us at least 10 years. The way the project's been designed, we have about 10 years before we have to start to refresh some of the work we've done, at least from a federal perspective. So when the timing will happen, we think will be different. We've heard from your bodies in the past that River Road and Highway 99 are the highest priorities. And so if that is still the case, then we would of course prioritize those corridors for implementation. But we would be working towards implementation on all of the corridors at some point over the next 10 years. So with that, we are happy to answer any questions, and I'll stop the presentation so we can see each other.
Thank you very much. It's very succinct, and of course, we've been through this material in various forms before. So thank you for running through. We will now, as we do in these joint meetings, we'll alternate questions from city councilors and from LTD directors. So I'll manage the city council queue, and President Vargas will manage the LTD queue, and each person will have 2 minutes to speak. And so I already see 4 counselors with hands up. So my queue is well established, and I'll kick it off to Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll need a second round. My questions are in 2 parts for each of the 2 legs that run in different parts of my ward. First of all, to Coburg Road, could we go back to I think it was the 3rd slide in that presentation? It was the one about public engagement. Sorry, I think it was the 3rd. I guess maybe it wasn't the 3rd one, but it's the one about public engagement. There we go. That's the one right there. So that looks like thorough and robust public engagement to me. But I have a constituent in my ward who is pretty strongly opposed to this, at least certainly this one up Coburg and others, who in a very short time, mostly by herself, has managed to get just this side, just less than 500 petitions signed saying that those folks immediately adjacent to that Coburg leg are absolutely against the idea. So I'm wondering if staff can help me understand how to square up. This looks like robust public engagement to me, but that's what she did. And I've got a pile of signatures, 3-4 inches high here. Anybody want to try and resolve that for me? Help me understand what's going on.
I can start, Rob, if you want to chime in. Yeah, I mean, I have seen the signatures that you're talking about, and certainly I'm glad that more people are participating in the process if they haven't talked with us before. That's right. That's our goal, actually, is to talk with as many people as possible. I can't say why those individuals don't feel like they've had an opportunity to participate. I can speak for what we have done, and I'll say that we've mailed at least once every household and business within a half mile of each of the corridors. For potentially impacted property owners, I think we've sent 4 or 5 letters to them asking essentially to meet with them. And we did go out, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we spent quite a bit of time in summer of 2018 going out to people's properties and talking with them with some pretty detailed drawings, which are conceptual, but we talked with them about the impacts. We also canvassed over 500 addresses directly adjacent to the corridors and talked with more than 270 people. Whether they were the owner or not, I'm not sure, but we talked with maybe the manager of a business or whoever was there. So I think we have tried to have a very robust process, and why those individuals feel that we haven't reached them, I'm not sure, but I would love to actually find out, because really the next steps of the process are a lot more public engagement to try to refine the designs. And we certainly want to make sure that those people have their concerns reflected in the project and try to address that as best we can.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. Now that you have those petitions, I suspect you probably have copies of those. You mentioned seeing those. Will you be reaching out to some of those people particularly in that process?
I don't have any specifics right now. Obviously, we, in the next steps of the process, we do need to figure out what that looks like if you all do select a locally preferred alternative. I don't have specifics. I don't want to commit to something on the spot, but we certainly have a really good list to start working from with people that maybe we haven't talked to before.
Cool.
I'll add to that.
Yeah.
Moving forward, if the council and the LTD board select preferred alternatives for us to move forward on, our top priority in terms of engagement will be people who own property or businesses or who live along the corridors and who would be potentially impacted by the designs. So that's really our priority. So to the extent that folks on those petitions are amongst the kind I described, that's how we would be engaging the most. Rather than reaching out to the broader public. We still want to do that broader public engagement where we're kind of narrowing in on, you'll be selecting an MX or enhanced corridor. And so we'll have that high level design vision for the corridor, but it's really about honing in and, making sure that we can both kind of still meet the goals of this project, but minimize impacts to the businesses, to the property owners, to the residences. And I think that the LTD and the city have a really good track record on previous projects of minimizing those impacts.
I'm not sure I agree with that last part, but I appreciate the efforts you want to make, and I support that. Lastly, I thought that the person conducting most of the leadership on this effort, opposition effort, had a really good question, and I'd love to have this answered before we get to a decision in March. It shouldn't be too tough, I wouldn't think, but I haven't seen the specifics. I would think that with any federal applications we did for federal funding, there would have been ridership estimates on both the West Eugene, West 11th, and the Riverbend, Glenwood loops. I'd like to see those that we put in an application compared with what our measurements are today. Can I get that?
We can certainly provide that to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we have the opportunity to hear from the LTD Board of Directors. So if there's anyone that wishes to ask a question or make a comment, and I just want to remind this group, as we heard earlier from Rob, that the Strategic Planning Committee and the Moving Ahead Oversight Committee has all seen the presentation and endorsed the staff recommendations. And luckily those committees are made up of LTD board members. So they might not have as many questions or comments this evening. I just wanted to make sure that distinction was clear. Now, with that being said, any LTD board members wishing to chime in at this time? And I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised. So in that case, oh, okay, we've got Dawn Norden. Go ahead, Dawn.
Well, not so much a question of this, but maybe a response to Councillor Clark and some of the written material that we've received in the last week, a lot of that. Caitlin and I just attended a meeting with the American Association of Public Transit in Orlando. And one of the themes around the whole transportation industry was relooking at what does transportation look like in the era of COVID and how we're going to provide services to our communities. And one of the metrics that was questioned was ridership. And what is the purpose of this is not measuring ridership at the moment, but providing the essential transportation networks in our community. Now, we may have ridership go up and down, and we've certainly seen this, well, since 2011 anyhow. It's been declining nationally, and then we dropped off suddenly because of COVID. We're recovering a little bit more, but chasing this ridership metric was not perhaps the best measure to see what service we can provide to our communities. And that thing of chasing that and wanting to see this and wanting to see the ridership numbers in an accelerating, no, we weren't going to see that right now. And I don't think that's the change that we want to follow with right now. And this is a comment that was received all across the industry, from major metropolitan areas like New York and Dallas and the smaller communities and like ourselves. We've experienced this ridership change a lot. So I just like to make that comment, that's all.
Thanks, Dawn.
Hey, thank you. Councilor Sarette.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chair Caitlin. Sorry, Chair Vargas. So I just want to offer that I agree that these choices seem the most logical for these corridors. I really appreciate the amount of study that has gone into discerning which options, if any, make the most sense. I think they will get us increased benefit for our public transit while using public dollars most appropriately for each corridor. So the cost benefit analysis seems right on in my estimation. For River Road, there's been a huge amount of engagement, particularly through the River Road Santa Clara planning process, and a great deal of support expressed from my constituents for the MX option. In spite of those recent communications that Councillor Clark referenced that we received, I would encourage my colleagues to listen to the voices of those who have been most engaged in the process over the past several years, who've invested their time and their energy in understanding what is being proposed and have come on to the side of supporting MX and have even lobbied me to say, you know, please make sure that MX gets built out here. We know there are people in our community and other communities who don't support public transit and don't want to see further investment in it. And I believe this particular opposition effort is trying to engage those folks, but I don't believe that is a majority of the public. I haven't checked my email today, but as of yesterday, I don't believe I've received one communication from a property owner along River Road who has concerns about this proposal. I do have a couple more comments, so I'll get back in the queue. Thanks.
All right, next up, I see Pete Knox. And as a reminder, when you're done speaking, please put yourself back on mute. Thank you so much. Pete, go ahead.
Thanks a lot. Full disclosure, I was one of the board members on both SPC, Strategic Planning Committee, and the Oversight Committee. So I've had a double. This is like my third dose of this, and I I absolutely was behind the recommendations that were given by staff, and I think they made a lot of sense. But I do talk to people, and I want to put on the public record what because the concern that the petitioner that did this had was about it was pretty up there was this idea that you have only one travel lane, and people are afraid that means they're going to get more congestion. How is it? Can you guys explain why that's just not true?
Rob, do you want to take this one? I'm
Sure.
happy to, but I think you're better positioned.
I mean, it's been a while, but we hire, as part of our consultant team, there are traffic engineers, and we have them study the different alternatives, and then they tell us how is the traffic going to perform. And so I don't have that information at my fingertips right now, but that informed the recommendation that the traffic engineering, the modeling they did, found that traffic will still flow. And they use lane use projections looking into the future. So it's not based on what the traffic generation on River Road today, but it's based on what additional development will happen on River Road into the future. We had similar, I think, concerns about South Willamette Street when there were 2 travel lanes in each direction. And I think, in my opinion, the traffic flows pretty well there now with 1 lane each way. But I could see River Road, the traffic volumes I don't know that they're really higher on River Road than South Willamette Street, but it feels like a much bigger street. And I could see that people would, have concerns about that. So, maybe something we should do is to dig back into our modeling and try to share that more with the community, because it's probably not that easy to find for people right now. Andrew, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think too, one thing to highlight is we took a serious look, and when you get closer to Beltline, we're actually showing in the conceptual designs 2 lanes, because when you get closer to Beltline, we couldn't do the 1 lane concept without really adversely impacting people, travel times for people who are driving. And really, one of our goals was not to do that. We want to provide more accessibility and more safety for people. We don't want to slow down the traffic at the expense. We don't want to do this at the expense of everyone driving. So when we took a look at it around Beltline, you do go back up to 2 lanes because you need it. But on Lower River Road, the 1 lane, it worked very well in our modeling, and we're happy to share all of that. We took a look at every intersection along the corridor and did the numbers, and we'll continue to actually do that as we refine the designs. We have to redo that work and make sure that we're still looking good.
Okay.
Yep. All right. I'm done.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome, Chair Vargas and LTD partners. And thank you, Rob and Andrew, for the collaborative and engaging report. I have some questions about the 30th corridor, especially from my previous life as an LCC board member. It was often impressed upon us that River Road would be next with an MX, and then the route to Lane Community College. And I'm wondering, when I see no build currently for that 30th route, especially under the lane of minimizing the impact to neighbors and businesses, I'm wondering what seat at the table anyone from the community college community had in the consultation with LTD and the county in regards to that 30th transit corridor in particular.
I can say we've done a number of outreach events actually at LTC down at their property because it's a great place to talk with a lot of people who use the corridor. Our recommendation really is based on a couple of things, and that's when we looked at the enhanced corridor and the MX, it kind of locks us into a less flexible way to serve LCC Currently, LTD operates really frequent buses whenever LCC is in session, sometimes more frequently than MX. And, that works really well because a lot of the students, they want to get there 5 minutes before class starts, 10 minutes before class starts, not 30. So we run a lot of buses kind of at one time to get everybody there. The major issues we heard about in public feedback around getting to LCC in terms of people, for instance, biking, not taking the bus, they're really on 30th Avenue in a county-owned portion. And our project didn't propose any type of investments to make that safer or easier to bike or walk over. The county is looking at that as part of a separate process. And there wasn't a lot of travel time savings. The issues of the bus getting out of downtown, that's kind of an issue for us. But once we get out of downtown and onto Amazon Parkway or onto Hilliard and Patterson, traffic flows pretty well. The bus doesn't really get stuck in traffic. So we kind of looked at all those factors, and our staff recommendation really is based on the fact that a lot of the safety issues are being addressed through city and county plans and projects going on right now, and that the bus ridership going to LCC is really tied to LCC kind of times, and the flexibility of being able to meet the schedules for LCC worked better. With enhanced corridor, we actually saw a negative ridership if we built something because of the way that the service would actually be less frequent to LCC. So I think that
it's interesting, Andrew. Thank you. If I can move from the county land into the city, the Amazon station appears to be wholly underutilized right now. And data points from the Southeast Neighbors Transportation Committee illustrate that there's great potential with that Amazon station. Could you talk a bit about how the Moving Ahead project
Sorry, did we lose sound? I think Matt got frozen, but maybe there was enough of a question there that you can actually still respond, and hopefully he'll come back.
Hopefully you can hear our answer. I don't know that we didn't really get to that high level of detail around, like, could we create a mobility hub, or what kind of facility could we create at Amazon Station? One of the challenges with Amazon Station is it's not when you look at creating corridors like these, and Andrew could speak to this in more detail, you look at how many people live within a quarter mile or half a mile of each station that would walk to it. And Amazon Station has a park on one side, so it doesn't have the kind of the potential ridership from people that would walk to the station. Now, I mean, people can drive there and park there, but there's a limited number of parking spaces, and you're competing with runners and people with dogs and that sort of thing. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Andrew.
Yeah, I think that was a good answer, Rob. I'll say, we have not had a lot of people use Amazon Station as a park and ride. And as you mentioned, there's kind of half the potential corridor is park, and we're really happy to serve the park, but we frankly don't see a ton of ridership there. Other studies we've done recently have shown if ridership is what we're looking for, and a lot of the competitiveness, if we're looking for grants, is around ridership, though that's certainly not our only goal. We're better off running our buses on Willamette Street and on Hilliard and Patterson, probably, just because you're closer to more people. And that's, it's intuitive, but it's also really true that the closer we are to more people, the more people are going to ride. So I will say Amazon Station's it's a great station. It's very beautiful, and I'm happy that we serve it.
Thank you. My cutoff, so my apologies. So I missed part of Rob's answer, but I'm happy to go back and watch it, and apologies for freezing. My final question, and I might need a second round, Mayor, if I can't see the timer right now, revolves around preserving neighborhood routes. I hope that that our neighborhood routes aren't sacrificed for any moving ahead pieces or projects, especially for our most vulnerable residents, seniors, and students who use the neighborhood routes. Andrew, you commented on this the last time we had a joint LTD City of Eugene meeting. Can I get assurance that our neighborhood routes won't be sacrificed by advancing this project?
Nothing in moving ahead has any cuts to the neighborhood routes except where there are, if we're replacing a route that currently goes through a neighborhood, we've done cost modeling that kind of puts that service back in some modified fashion. So as part of moving ahead, there are no reductions in neighborhood service. So for instance, on River Road, the MX would terminate at Santa Clara Station if it were built. And obviously an MX bus doesn't drive around in the neighborhoods up there. That would be replaced in our kind of where we're at with the project with some unspecified neighborhood service that we would have to figure out the routing for. And when you see our cost numbers, when we say it would cost so much to operate per year, it's based on replacing that service.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chair Vargas.
Gino, you're next.
Well, Councillor Keating has raised the concern. That's something I'm looking into, and that's when we do implement moving ahead, it does increase operational costs, and those cost increases need to be absorbed somewhere. So I'm working with staff to get a better understanding about how that works, and just am anxious to see how we're going to accommodate the increase in the operational costs and the implementation of moving ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Ye.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone who presented today. I had a few questions. My first question is going to build off of something Matt asked about the 30th Avenue. So it sounds like there's work being done on bike improvements by the county. And I'm wondering if we decide to go with a no build alternative and there's an opportunity to be, for the sections in the city that might go along with what the county is going to do, is that going to make it so that is a lost opportunity, or are we just going to absorb that into like stuff the city is doing anyway?
We're really interested, at the city level, we're really interested in doing a design study of the section of 30th from Hilliard to Spring Boulevard, which is the county line, or where the county jurisdiction happens. We want to look at how can we redesign the street to work better for all modes, and not to feel like people that live in the neighborhoods north and south of it feel like it really divides them and that it's not a safe street. Doesn't feel safe to cross. Even we put a signal in for kids to get to Camas Ridge, and there's a lot of unease about just speeding traffic there and vehicles not stopping when the light is red. And so we really want to look at how to calm the traffic on that section of 30th. And that's part of the idea of, the no build. So we have time to do a study like that and look at how to make that street work better. We didn't really look at that in any detail through moving ahead. Moving ahead was at a higher level for that section of the corridor.
Okay, so if someone was concerned about that, your answer would be that this no build, if we did go with no build, doesn't mean that's not going to happen. It just means it's going to happen through a different process.
Right, and in fact, like I said, we didn't even look at redesigning the Eugene section of 30th as part of moving ahead. So we were just going to run the buses in mixed traffic on that part, and we weren't going to really redesign it. So but I would say at the staff level of the city, we see that as one of our priority streets to redesign.
Awesome. Okay, so let's switch to 99. So what I'm hearing is that since we don't have a good plan out in that area for what we want to do, that it feels like the wrong time to then be putting a larger infrastructure package like the full MX. Is that what I'm hearing from you guys?
Yeah, I'll just say from the transit side, we get most of the benefits. I think, our modeling showed 8 minutes versus 10 minutes of travel time savings for the bus, things like that. So we get almost all the transit benefit, and we're making almost the exact same safety investment, and we can certainly look at making it exactly the same, right? Because we need to make Highway 99 safer for people who aren't in cars and people in cars, frankly. And we can do all that without making a major investment in things like MX stations, kind of the, raised platforms, more expensive buses we can't run outside the MX system, because we don't think we would get the kind of transformative land use changes that we see when you coordinate your land use planning around, really big transit investment like we've done with MX, when we do that planning, the results could totally be different, but we haven't done that work yet.
And since this project is supposed to be in the next, well, you said 10 plus years. I thought it was the next 10 years. That's kind of means that I guess staff is saying we're not going to get to this area for any type of planning for more than 10 years. What if we get to it earlier? I mean, I guess I have a problem with just pushing the Highway 99 to the side, but we still have time to talk about that. I am out of time. I might need a second round.
Can I answer that? Would it
Sure.
be good to answer that a little bit? Like, I mean, first of all, enhanced corridors are still expensive. I mean, we're still talking about tens of millions of dollars of investment. And I think there's really, one of the things we've heard from the community recently is people really want to see us beautify Highway 99. And I think we could really look more closely at that and like, where are the opportunities? Like a lot of the street trees there, they don't seem like they're doing so great. How can we really make this corridor pop more with what the infrastructure we have? So that's one thing. Secondly, I mean, if you look at River Road, there's a lot of multifamily housing that's been developed on River Road, even before making any zoning changes that have come out of the study that the city did with LTD and the community. So and so I think if Terry's here, if she wants to jump in, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see if there is this neighborhood planning effort looking at the Highway 99 corridor, what opportunities are there for housing in that corridor? I think years ago, I remember when Robin Hostick was in the planning division, his analyses show the redevelopment potential just wasn't really there in the Highway 99 corridor. I'm not an expert at that stuff at all, but I just wonder, like, are we likely to see more multifamily housing along that corridor? Because that's probably the biggest generator of those, kind of trips. So, I mean, you start to see more on Barger, but Terry, do you want to jump in at all if you're here?
I'm here. I would just add that it's in the community vision to encourage compact and coordinated land use and transportation investment on all of these corridors. Moving ahead is more about the order in which we do that and the order in which we go after funding.
Just one more thing is that in terms of like, if let's just say this council on board selected a preferred alternative that was MX on River Road, enhanced on Highway 99, we would probably implement them on a 2-track approach where we go after a larger, like a small starts grant for MX, but an enhanced corridor can be implemented more incrementally because you're not having to switch out the buses and stations on the corridor. So we could look at, right from the start, are there things we can start doing on Highway 99? Whereas on River Road, again, we need to go for that kind of big grant to really make the MX investment.
I just want to check and see if there's any LTD directors at this time that wish to speak. Michelle or Emily or Susan. Okay, I see a lot of hands up for counselors, so we'll just kick it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilor Groves.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chair Vargas. Also, thank you, Andrew and Rob, for staff reports. A lot of what I wanted to ask, questions-wise, have already been answered. I was concerned about the community engagement, and one more time, we're finding ourselves with what appears to be a robust community engagement with people still feeling like they're caught by surprise. So, I mean, I think we always need to analyze what we've done and what can we do better next time. As far as the wider sidewalks, I like that, but especially with regard to safe routes to school, anything we can do to separate kids away from these major transit corridors is a good move. Vehicles jump curbs, they do cause death and injury when they do so. So this is something I hope we're really paying attention to, and want to highlight the efforts we're trying to make in the River Road corridor of trying to get a pedestrian bike bridge over the belt line to reconnect two neighborhoods that have been bisected by a pretty significant highway. I also wanted to comment, I live out west area of Eugene, southwest, and I'm on West 11th continually. And it seems like the shared lanes work very well there. So I hope we consider that rather than taking lanes completely off the table for only transit use, but I'll look forward to hearing more about that. And then I want to give a plug for our transit corridors as a place to place housing. I know Councilor Keating and I bring that up all the time, and that's where I think LTD can really lend a hand in moving people throughout our community. So as we go forward, looking at how we can connect all this together, I think is going to be very important. And I have more to say, but I don't know I even want a second round at this point. Thank you.
Just keep calling on counselors. Mayor Dennis and Sats, who has their hands up.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll just keep working our way through. So Councilor Semple and then Councilor Evans.
Thank you. This is a huge project. I mean, we still have that notebook from before the pandemic. So we've watched a lot of analysis, a lot of contemplation about this. It's really complicated. So I appreciate the analysis of this opportunity. A couple of the recommendations I was surprised at because they were not what I remembered from before, what I thought was reasonable. So I especially appreciate the explanations because it really brought it into focus that we are looking for more ridership and safety. So I also agree we should take those choices where we get the best bang for our buck. And I remember that this is still the beginning of these projects, and the maps we see aren't the final project outcomes. So there'll be more outreach and design and refinements. The one thing that concerns me is of course the unknown. If ridership has already been going down before, when we want to get it up, how difficult is this going to be, and how much, of course, is COVID changing our needs with people not moving around as much? So that the ridership metric is really important, and I know it also depends on frequency and outreach. So it's really good work. I look forward to it progressing. I still think the monorail out Coburg, we should look into that. And gosh, you're making it more and more expensive. I don't know how I'm going to get those free buses. Thank you.
I do see that Don's hand is up. However, since he's already had a chance, can we hear from Councilor Evans before we hear a second round of these folks? Does that sound good?
That sounds great. All right, Councilor Evans.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor, Madam Chair. A couple things real quick. I think it was pointed out by Councilor Ye just a few minutes ago that we do have a chicken and egg situation on Highway 99. And the fact of the matter is, because we have not had a comprehensive planning effort in the Highway 99 area to determine what we are going to do with our growth, how we are going to coordinate that with our school district. We are already having major traffic issues as far as congestion is concerned as you move further west from Highway 99. And so while I have supported this this proposal as a representative of the council on the Strategic Planning Committee, I do think there needs to be some more work done. And I'm not sure how we can simultaneously do the planning efforts that we need to have done in West Eugene and then overlay that with, or let's put it this way, move ahead with a transportation solution that has not been informed by a comprehensive planning process to tell us exactly what we need, where we need it, and how much of it do we need. We definitely need more frequency on the Highway 99 corridor. We need higher capacity. I think those things are obvious from the studies that have been done and what the work that the planners have done so far, but that does not correlate with an overall planning effort that if we do the wrong thing and we have the wrong solution to the right problem, we're not going to get anywhere. We will be just being throwing good money after bad. So I'll say that to this. I also think that we need to do something similar to what we did with West Eugene MX. And when I was on the LTD board, the first assignment I got was West Eugene MX. Give me a second.
Okay. Dawn, do you want to go ahead and then we can go back to the counselors?
I realize this is to the planners here. It was a high level thing and it's just a cross section on the streets, but I was curious about the design for putting the bicycles out left of the buses. And is there going to be a barrier between the automobile traffic and the bicyclist? And perhaps that hasn't come up to that design standard yet, but I was just curious what the thoughts were on that.
I'll just say on River Road, we have kind of budgeted in our capital costs for protected bike lanes. Of course, as we go through and we're taking a look at all of these corridors, you've seen a lot more protected bike lanes. I think in the last 5 years in the city, I think the oldest protected bike lane probably isn't quite 5 years old or just about that. So as we go to update these in the next phase, we're certainly going to be taking a look at best practices to make sure that our designs are kind of up to our standards. And I think things like protected bike lanes are certainly more standard now than they have been in the past. Specifically with routing around behind stations, you're starting to see that in Portland on Division Avenue. And we work closely with kind of other agencies around the country, and I'm sure the city works with other cities to make sure that when we do these innovative new things, if someone else tries it out first, we'll learn from their experience and use that experience to make our designs kind of state of the art whenever we're doing them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a lineup of counselors for a second round. So Counselor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say to Dawn, I agree absolutely with you that public transportation is a critically important public utility, and that the bigger scope of the questions around that public utility are important to ask. But I would say that I think ridership data is another critical piece of analysis, and it's more than just whether someone is supportive of public transportation or not. I think it goes towards service level and form and all kinds of things that can be informed by ridership data. I mean, if LTD's idea of the right service level to one particular corridor was a big buggy pulled by a couple of horses, I think ridership data would tell you more about form than it would tell you anything else. So I think those pieces of information are important for us to talk about. On to the second corridor that serves a part of my ward, Claire, I've actually gotten a lot of emails from people who have concerns. But I would agree that the vast majority of people in River Road and Santa Clara are in favor. It's been a part of their planning process forever, so it's very important. My questions, I guess, are to, I don't know how to ask this and I'm running out of time. Rob, what percentage of a leg down River Road and Santa River Road area would be paid for by City of Eugene funds versus any other source, federal, state, ridership, payments? What would the City of Eugene share of those costs be?
We haven't determined. Sorry,
I was going to say
hear the last part.
Everything.
I still didn't hear the last part.
All in.
So I'll answer it best I can that we haven't determined that yet. But one thing to keep in mind is typically when we're looking at a corridor like an MX, we're looking at the share that the city and LTD would go towards would be what's called a local match. Historically, we've been able to get a 20% local match on those types of projects. And in terms of like what funds the city has that could potentially help with that, a couple of things are systems development charges. So for example, the protected bike lane on River Road is eligible for systems development charges. So that's one thing the city has at its disposal that could help pay for the local match for River Road MX. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna say, I can't answer what would happen specifically with this. There are a lot of federal programs we can use, but historically, I think that the share that the city of Eugene and LTD have paid for our current MX projects is around 2%. Because historically, we have received a lot of our funding for that what we call local match, which is really just not federal. We received that from state lottery bonds historically. Whether that's true in the future is, of course, anyone's guess.
I'm way over time, but I'd like a third round to ask about the costs borne by City of Eugene residents versus non-city residents in that corridor.
Okay, we'll get back to you, Councillor Clark, Councillor Siret, and then Councillor Ye.
Thank you. So the things that I wanted to follow up on were related to Highway 99. So in terms of neighborhood planning, I think it's really up to the council to decide when that's going to happen for Bethel, not just Highway 99. And I think it would be a shame to pass on this proposal while we figure out planning for Bethel. It seems to me the investments being proposed for this corridor are such that if we do the planning and need to make adjustments based on those results, it would not be a huge cost to make some of those. We aren't proposing to install raised platforms or invest in new MX buses, and instead are investing in more crosswalks, more stops, both of which I think are things we could say we need right now. And there's a new multifamily development that's about to put in for permits at Highway 99 in Jessen, and having approved transit service for that development will have a meaningful impact in terms of reducing carbon emissions and congestion on that corridor.
Thank you. Councillor Ye, and then Councillor Keating.
Thanks. So I saved the best for last. Ward 4. I really appreciate the analysis that was done on MLK and Coburg. I think people have done a really thoughtful job of looking at those corridors and what they need, and weighing that against consequences of putting in new stuff. So while I would prefer to have more full MXs in our town than less, I think that the enhanced corridor proposal for Coburg makes a lot of sense. It still gets us a lot of what we need. I really appreciate staff pointing out that the corridor is not working for anyone, which I think is 100% accurate. It's not, it doesn't work whether you're walking or you're biking or you're driving or you're on the bus. It's a mess. And if this was going to get us some solutions to that, I think everyone's going to be a lot happier. And I've been okay with the enhanced corridor on MLK this entire time. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think more robust infrastructure in that area would make sense. I do have a question about how you marked that it needs more refinement and further engagement, but you said that about all of them. So what's the difference on Coburg? Why does it have that special thing next to it? Oh my gosh, I'm so over time.
I want to apologize
sure.
for this. Hold on one second. I think Naya is giving you only 1 minute for your second round, but I didn't announce that reduction at all. So we'll just carry on with the 2 minutes. That was my mistake of not getting my signals clear with Naya.
So for sure, like I said earlier, there's traffic delay that we want to look more closely at on the lower part of Coburg Road. That's just gotten worse over time. And we, at the city staff level, we feel like the moving ahead designs didn't really address that. So we want to re-look at, there's that whole kind of spaghetti strand of streets that come in Club Road and Cedarwood and Southwood, and just trying to figure out, is there a way that we can make that all work better? So we'd like to go start a study looking at that. I mean, honestly, and maybe it's because of the opposition that was engaged, that was referred to earlier by Councillor Clark, but it kind of felt like we were hearing more opposition from businesses on Coburg Road like a year ago. I don't know if it was actually just people opposed to doing something on Coburg Road, or it was actually from businesses that and property owners on Coburg Road. But we just want to like look a little more closely at who were we engaging on Coburg Road, make sure that they felt bought into the public engagement process. So we figured if we're gonna go ahead, John, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut in. I was gonna say from the transit side, right? When we do these conceptual designs, right? Like I know 10,000 little things that we're gonna want to tweak as we make them more detailed for poring over them for hours. And Coburg Road has a lot of those. When we look at other corridors, I'm much more certain, like, there are things that are going to shift. But on Coburg Road, where the intervention we're trying to do, if you look at the concepts, it's harder. It's more engineering work. And that means that I think that the public engagement is one thing, but actually just the engineering work of making sure we're doing a good job and trying to, like I said, we've done some things where, the buses switch lanes, and we got to get all those details right. And that's going to take more study, I think, on a staff side than on other corridors. So it is the public piece, but on the transit side, I want to do a lot of work to make sure that we get the travel time savings we think, and that we're like I said, minimizing the impacts to property owners.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Keating and then Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mayor. Full disclosure, in a previous life at the radio stations I worked at, LTD was a partner who collaborated with us and a client of mine at the time, celebrating the West Eugene MX. And if this was a customer needs analysis with my client, I would jump up and down and say that the community needs buy-in and ask what are you doing creatively to get the community behind this concept, which I'm a supporter of. We talked when we last did a joint meeting about free for all Fridays, free ridership all up and down. And then Councillor Semple touched on it a bit, and our neighbors to the north in Corvallis have free ridership all throughout the week. What creative concepts, like a free ride Friday, have been discussed at the board level?
If Mark's on here, Mark, is that something you want to answer?
Yes, I can. So we've had off and on discussions about free fares for quite a while. I don't think Corvallis is a fair comparison, because they've taxed the whole city for the transit in a different way to pay for the fares. But there's been a lot of pilots, I guess, on free fares around the country. And, although we've had discussions about free fares, we have a lot of reduced fares already that, takes our average fare to about 60 cents from the $1.75 that it actually is. So, we do a lot of things, but free fares, we haven't considered as a board.
Well, please put me in the corner championing such a concept, and let me know what I can do personally, professionally, politically to advance such an issue. Finally, in my last minute, Mayor, I want to move slightly away from moving ahead and simply thank the drivers, bus operators, MX operators who are frontline workers, who, while we were all on lockdown and meeting virtually, were continuing to work out, shuffling folks around, doing so with grace and wearing many hats while they were driving, transporting riders to doctor's visits, grocery stores, and to work as fellow frontline workers. And I would be remiss if I didn't tip my hat to the LTD and MX drivers in our community. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. So Councillor Evans, my apologies. I'm going to let Councillor Zelenka go next because he hasn't even had a first round, and then I'll give you a second round.
Yeah, I think I said this at the Oversight Committee that I too am in favor of more MX, except on the 30th Avenue corridor. I think we're going to, in 10 years or 15 years, we're going to look back on this and I think we're going to say, oop, we made a mistake. We should have been pushing this a lot further, because I think this is going to become more needed, more costly, and not doing it now is just going to not be the best optimal solution for our community. That being said, I realize where this is going and support the recommendation. The fact that the enhanced corridors don't preclude MX in the future, it's just that we're going to start basically over if we go down that path, and I think that would be a shame.
Councillor Evans.
When I first moved here in 1987, my first real job was working for LTD in customer service. So I got a real good understanding of how transit operates, how transit is paid for in this community, and what that means. And what it means is we are serving people all across the board. Those people who are transit dependent, otherwise they don't have cars, they have no other options to get around the community but the transit system, and also choice riders, those people who want to support environmental stewardship and be responsible in terms of how transportation is used in the community. There are two things that I want to suggest in terms of this conversation. The first is, when I was chair of the West Eugene MX committee, one of the things that we realized is that our outreach at one point was not sufficient to the business owners along the corridor to make sure that we could have a successful implementation of West Eugene MX. So we changed course, and we had folks go door to door and talk directly, eyeball to eyeball, with business owners and help them understand that this was not something that was going to destroy their business, and it was not something that was going to keep their customers away from their business. And since then, I have had people over the last few years say to me, Greg, you know what? This isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. This was not a mistake. This is something good for us. And I think that that's something that speaks well for the success that we've had in West Eugene. The last thing that I'm going to say is this. To Gino's point, we do need to figure out a way about how we pay for operations of an expanded and growing system. Right now, the bulk of operations is paid for by the payroll tax, which covers almost about 80% of the operations of LTD. That is fuel, bus operators, customer service people, administrators, everybody else like that. What we are talking about right now is we're talking about capital money, which yes, we can get that to build it, but we do need to figure out, once we build it, how do we operate it, and how do we operate it and sustain that operation over an extended period of time.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, one last round.
Thank you, Mayor, very much. Rob and Andrew, I think specifically any of our staff or LTD staff that want to answer this question is awesome. More of you, the better. You've mentioned some degree of costs, local match, 20%, whatever it ends up being. It's clear that the citizens of Eugene, those who are Eugene taxpayers, will pay more for the River Road Santa Clara leg of MX than will non-city residents. So my question is there any work by either of those staffs to work on cost equity for for the residents that will use that public utility? And if not, why not?
I'm going to jump in here really quick because what I feel like I heard staff say is we haven't determined the costs of each of those corridors yet. We have some rough ideas based on the past. And when we do, you know, we've roughly paid 20%. And I think when we get to that stage, depending on what that 20% is, we can start to understand in a little bit more granular level, is that a city resident, a county resident, who's actually paying for that? I don't know right in this moment if what you're saying is city residents are going to pay more than non-city residents, because we haven't really determined what that funding source is yet. I don't think we've ever done it with property taxes. So it would have been another source that was more road oriented. And I see where you're going with this. And I wonder if we could have a little bit of time between now and your next meeting in March to kind of flesh out some of those details.
That's awesome, and I agree. And if you take that into consideration, address that issue, I know it will be important to a lot of city residents in that area. And Alan, I agree with you about long-term costs when it comes to public utility infrastructure. And if all of us want to just agree right now to go ahead with Mark Frohnmeyer's idea, I'll be the biggest warrior in favor of it, and I'll fight for it. If we want to buy 10,000 electric cars and make them, you know, autonomous that you can get with an Uber app, I will fight for that, because I think that's where the future actually is. Individual transportation on a public scale. So thanks.
Okay, so I see a couple of more hands. So Councillor Evans, the third round, and then Councillor Syret.
I just want to make sure that people are clear and understand how public transportation is financed in this community. When LTD was born in 1970, also along with TriMet, the agreement was that the business community, that there would be a payroll tax that would support TriMet operations, and the same thing for LTD in Eugene. The other transit agencies around the state come out of the property tax pool, so they're underfunded. Our payroll tax is what supports the operations of LTD all the way through. You only get about 17% from the fare box. The fare box does not cover it. What we are doing with capital money and getting federal dollars from FTA to build the infrastructure and to buy the buses and to buy the BRT vehicles, it's an 80-20% relationship, 80 from the feds, 20 locally. We don't have a local source to do capital. What we had to do with MX all the way through was get money from the legislature, from lottery funds, to be able to have that local match. My assumption is that's what we will do again, is go back to the state for the local match, because we do not have a local designated source of tax revenue or fees generated to be able to cover those costs. So let's be clear about, one, how the system runs, two, how it's funded, and three, who pays the bills. Because we ultimately all pay the bills through the payroll tax, one way or another.
Thank you for that. Councillor Syret.
Thank you, Mayor. I suspect some of my comments will elicit a fourth round from Councillor Clark. So the way that was phrased about who pays and that the folks on River Road are going to pay more because we're giving them MX is very misleading. We all pay for the services that are provided by transit. As Councillor Evans was pointing out, that, you know, the operations are funded through a payroll tax, and when we improved South Willamette, all taxpayers help pay for that. The residents and property owners along South Willamette weren't taxed separately for those improvements. So I just want that to be clear. I understand the question about county residents versus city residents, but I was hearing an assertion that River Road residents are going to pay more because they're getting MX. Everyone in the city is helping bear the cost, whether it's through the payroll tax or our federal income tax that's coming back to us in these federal grants. And I have to say, I can't imagine how bad the traffic would be if we replaced all of our public transit with 10,000 more vehicles on the road. I support EVs, but that vision sounds like a nightmare to me, not some kind of dream.
Thank you. I really appreciate the robust round on this, and I just want to say a couple of things, which is when we look at this, we are building for the city of the future. We are not necessarily building for exactly the city we have now, and we're trying to envision that future. And I appreciate the planning process, and really appreciate the care with each of these corridors, recognizing that each face a unique combination of safety issues, congestion issues, and the need for really just better bus service. And so I'm actually very happy with this package, given how many meetings we've had about this and all the iterations we have gone through in looking at this package. I will also say about the public engagement, this is always a challenge, and there was a sort of a 2-year hiatus in talking about this. And so I think a lot of people who may have been sort of aware of it in 2018 were then are really not aware of it in 2022 because they just haven't thought about it for so many years, maybe thought it went away. And just to plant a seed that we do have 464 petitions with names and addresses. And there is a potential to actually reach out to those folks quite directly with information or links to the moving ahead. It's never clear to me when people sign a petition how much they really understand what's happening, and that is an opportunity to engage them. And finally, Mike, I predicted this morning that you would bring up micromobility and say that you missed your chance to go to the Arcimoto opening of their new warehouse, which has a little bit of something for everyone. So I'm with Councilor Syred. I think this fundamentally in my mind is both a safety question and fundamentally an equity question, which is that everybody cannot afford to operate a car. We're building a community in which we want to devote less space to parking and traffic. We want it to be a human-centered community, and that biking and walking and rolling and having good bus service is just essential for the city we are going to. And anyone who's lived in a larger city, I mean, I spent my youth in New York. You can't get anywhere without the trains and the buses and being able to walk. So we have to anticipate, we're not going to be in New York City, but we do have to anticipate a future in which that is much, much more viable and safer and cleaner for everyone. And so I will give you one last comment, Councilor Clark, and then we're done.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with you entirely. I was unable to make the Arcimoto thing the other day. It broke my heart, but I had work to do, and I had some customers to serve or trying to buy a house. But to Claire, I would say, I think that if we had that system, nobody would drive their current cars. I, for one, I drive an F-150 and it's awesome. It's a great truck. I wouldn't drive that anymore if the system I described existed within the city. And I think a lot of people would do the same thing, and we'd burn a lot less gas. That was the point of that whole story. Thanks.
And Mayor, I just want to make sure that for those who haven't spoken yet, Michelle, Emily, and Susan, I just want to check in. We've talked a lot about feedback that we've gotten from constituents, or kind of talked about information that was misinformation out there. And I want to make sure that, you're using this time to address just really the public and constituents in your sub-districts, if you have anything else that you want to share. So I want to just kind of give you one last opportunity. Okay. All right. Looks like everyone's good. Go ahead, Mayor.
I thought I saw Emily's hand go up, but
sure.
My question went away. Thank you. It's okay.
And I'll just jump back in. I was just going to say, Caitlin, thanks for that opportunity. I really just wanted to hear what all of the city councilors had on their minds. It's really helpful coming from transit, hearing this multiple times, just understanding what other questions are out there and what else we need to focus on next. For the River Road area, I have over a number of years overwhelmingly heard positive and adamant support and requests for MX. And so I think that I was pleased to continue to see that as the package recommendation. And Coburg Road is challenging, but I know there's so much opportunity there in that challenge. So I'm excited to hear what else comes out of the research from that, and we'll see where that lands. So thank you.
Okay, I think with that, we are ready to adjourn. And so oh, Michelle, sorry, did I jump in?
That's okay. I was just, yeah, we'll get unmuted someday here. I was just going to express my thanks to all the counselors for their thoughtful questions and comments, several of which were also on my mind. This is a big project that we're looking to embark on, and I do just want to make sure that we're really thoughtful about our community's concerns and that we're doing that outreach and making sure that you know, we're really connecting with folks and helping, you know, build that support in the community.
Okay, I think this time I really mean it. I think we are really ready to adjourn. Thank you all.
And this LTD board meeting is officially adjourned as well.